Greetings from the city of brotherly love. I am Fernando Mendez, host of the Roundtable. We invite you to listen to our discussion of the themes of the day when we bring you regional, national, and international news. Señores oyentes de Usalamedianetwork, estamos aquí de nuevo con la mesa redonda de Roundtable. Tenemos un invitado especial, Santana, bienvenido, welcome. Este programa lo dirige Dani Ramos. Estamos empezando esta conversación preguntándole a nuestro invitado un par de preguntas. Santana, usted parece un hombre misterioso. You look like a man of mystery because I've been around in media a lot in Philadelphia, in a Hispanic barrio, and involved in several organizations, and we somehow we cross paths. You deliberately avoid media, avoid me, I don't know. Anyway, let's find out where you have been.
My name is Santana, and I'm from Kensington. I grew up here. I went to Shepherd School, Edison. I graduated from Edison High School. When I was 17, I joined the U.S. Army, and I left for 13 years. I was part of the invasion effort towards Iraq. And after 13 years, I came back home and started doing some work after I saw that, Kensington was in shambles. It was having some trouble with the opioid epidemic, poverty. So I didn't really know what to do because I didn't grow up in a house that did activism. We were pretty much surviving, trying to get to where we needed to be. And I met a friend, Ana Montanez, and I became part of Voces del Barrio. They were growing some food in Las Parcelas. So that was my first introduction to community work. After that, I started getting into harm reduction because I was trying to figure out what was going on in the neighborhood with the opioid epidemic and how the neighborhood got into such a bad situation. And I had connected it to poverty being the main driver of this issue. Also gentrification, because people were losing their homes, taxes were high. So that kind of threw me into the mix, but I was never the front man for anything. I was usually supporting, trying to get people to come out, or supporting the effort in any way I could. So yeah, I've been around and people know me, but I'm not like a person who's in your face with what I do, because I don't feel that people doing the work that I do should be performative. And a lot of that's just feeding their ego, and I don't need to feed my ego. I just want to help my community.
There are several organizations. As you mentioned, the drug epidemic, there are several groups involved in fighting that and helping people who are under drug addiction.
Yep.
Are you connected to any of them?
I actually was contracted to work for this organization called POPIN, the Philadelphia Overdose Prevention Network. Okay. And what we would do is try to figure out solutions for this issue, which is a public health issue more than anything else. How we could, one, ensure that the community was safe and clean for the residents, and for the homeless folks that were out on the street that were actively using, how to get them into some housing and get them into a space where they can recover safely. Because a lot of it, and a lot of people don't know this because they're just seeing what they see and they don't know the backstories. But there's folks out there. There was a Puerto Rican couple out there who have lived in Kensington since the 60s, and because of not being able to pay the property taxes on their house, they lost their house and they're living in the street. They had no family, they're not drug users, they're just out there living in the street. And what they tend to do is hang around the drug users for safety, because there's safety in numbers. You know, people are less likely to attack an old couple when there's 6 other people around them. Another thing that we're seeing is young people that are being thrown out of their houses by their parents for being either gay, trans, or whatever the case may be, and having to do sex work in order to survive. And that brings on its own things, which sometimes is drug use, because they're trying to get away from the things that they're dealing with. So, you know, on the onset, it looks like these people want to be out there, but in reality, when you look really deep into it, there's a reason why these folks are out there in the street, whether it be poverty or mental illness, escaping domestic violence, abuse at home, and all these other things, you know, attach themselves to them, and it's hard for them to break out of the position that they're in. But as a community, I believe that we can do it, because, you know, it's innate in Puerto Ricans to build community together. I believe that because that's the way I grew up. We were poor, yes, but we always worked together to ensure that our neighbors were good. If we had food, they had food, and vice versa.
Well, yeah, one of the things I want to say up front is I don't think poverty necessarily leads you to crime. You know, that's a whole separate issue. It requires probably people who are more, who have some expertise at psychology of how we grow up and what happens. But the drug problem was prevalent among Puerto Ricans back before you were born. In the 70s and early 80s, there was a Fairmount, Spring Garden area where there was, you know, that was a market there. So the gentrification moved them out, and they have been moving east and north ever since. And then now we have the Kensington area. The Kensington area, I had a newspaper back in 1988, 89, right in the middle of what's known as the Badlands, right, Fifth and Allegheny. Yeah. And that's where my paper was, right there. And I know that poverty did lead some people to start selling drugs. 2 young men came asking me for a job. They worked for a little while, but very soon one of them came and said, "My girlfriend's pregnant. I cannot work for you. I have to go and make more money." Yeah. So that's one aspect of that has not changed. Were you part of this people fighting this Conrail site, where there was so many people involved in that?
When I first got back to Philadelphia, that's when that was going on. That's what got me got my focus on harm reduction. Because I grew up literally on Swanson Street. It's Swanson and Gurney. Right. I grew up on that block, so I remember, like you said, I remember drugs back then. I remember people using heroin, but the difference was that people were doing it in their homes and not in the street. Yeah. And as poverty progressed in the community, less people had homes and had to do that open air, because people that are using, they're going to use. I believe that our job as community members is ensure that they survive that situation until they can get better. I have had friends that I went to school with. I've had people that I've been in relationships with die from overdoses that were completely preventable. And there's a stigma behind this, where people hide that part of their life. Unless they're homeless, they can't hide it from anybody. So, in my mind, I believe that as a community, it would be much better for us to ensure the safety of these folks, so that they can get better and they can help out in society. And at the same time, ensure that there's resources coming into our poor communities like jobs, child care, education, job training, those types of things.
Well, education obviously is one of those things that I see as a solution for, especially for poverty, for so many things. But it begins in the family, and that's where we seem to be. The roots of the problem are there in the family, which also extend to the neighborhood, because, as I say, it takes a village.
Yeah.
And if everything around these people, no matter how good your family is, if everything around you is drugs and crime and bad schools, that doesn't provide you with a good environment to grow up as a productive person.
I agree.
So we know about education being the root of a lot of the problems, the lack of education, the poor schools that we give people in urban areas where the money should be spent. The burbs, they do very well. They have beautiful schools, and they pay taxes to support them, obviously, but in town, in the center city, in the urban centers, there's an agglomeration of people with lack of resources, poor schools, and broken families, often single mother, single father raising children. So where do we begin? Because this is like the chicken and the egg question. Where do we begin with this?
I think this has to be like a multi-pronged thing. We can't just begin in one place and expect for it to like get better all at once. But I think that providing adequate and better resources in schools for children is one step, but also providing them with access to mental health is another thing. Also, with parents, like we have a lot of poor parents that are trying to work, just trying to survive, doing their day-to-day, that aren't able to spend time with their children because they have to work 2-3 jobs and still be on welfare. So obviously the living wage needs to be a thing, right? So that people can survive. Not only survive, so that they can live their life. Because if you're working 10, 12 hours a day for peanuts and you can't even spend time with your children, like that's another stress. That's mental anguish for both your children and yourself. So there's a lot of things that we need to take care of in order to for people to self-actualize, right? So that's getting older folks educated or trained in some jobs that's going to give them a living wage, ensuring that the kids have resources, maybe a team, a neighborhood team, a neighborhood resource center where they can go do art, things like that, keeps them off the streets, and gives them something to do, keeps their minds and hands occupied.
Well, you joined the Army at 17.
Yes.
Were you finished with high school?
I was.
Okay.
I was. Well, actually, no. When I enlisted, I hadn't even graduated yet.
Yeah.
I enlisted the year before I graduated because I knew that I wanted to leave.
So you were actually 18 by the time you joined?
Yes. Well, I joined at 17 and I left at 18. So I finished basic training at 18. I
see. Okay. Because I don't know, is that legal?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yep. I was on a delayed entry program.
Okay. Because, I know about many people who sort of lied about their ages in order to join the Army because that was one way out.
Yeah.
Sports is one way out. The Army has always been a way out of poverty, not only in this country. I'm from Colombia, so I know a lot of people who joined the Army just because that was one way to get out of poverty. Yeah. So we're covering too many topics that require in-depth discussion and all that.
Yeah.
The drug addiction thing is obviously a problem, and you say you're involved in that. But at the root of all this too is how our leaders providing solutions.
Yes.
And that's one of the problems we have had in this country, that the way politics has evolved, instead of offering solutions, a lot of these new politicos are asking to be put in office just because they want the power. They don't offer solutions necessarily. They lie about what they can do.
Yeah.
We have always known politicians either lie or exaggerate, but that has become the MO of so many people who want to get elected. They lie or they exaggerate their credentials or what. They lie about their background. I mean, the best example of that, Herschel Walker down in Georgia. So anyway, we can talk about that topic a little later. But I want to take a break, and then on the other side of this, we'll ask you a few more questions about the possible solutions. Some answers, partial answers. Nobody has a solution to the whole problem, but there might be some partial answers about civic engagement, about getting involved in the community. So, estamos en compañía de Moses Santana, hablando sobre varios temas aquí en la Mesa Redonda. Estamos en Usala Media. No se vayan, regresamos en un momento.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Once there was a boy who did the same thing again and again. One day he was told he had autism. He got help and slowly learned how to live with it better.
Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
Encuentra el bosque más cercano en descubreelbosque.org. El bosque, más cerca de lo que cree.
Señores oyentes de Usalamedi, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda de Roundtable en el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal. Dirige Dani Ramos, les habla Fernando Mendez en compañía de Moses Santana. Estamos hablando sobre varios temas relacionados con la vida diaria en Filadelfia, las drogas, la pobreza, etc. So, where do we start looking for solutions? As I mentioned before the break, I think civic engagement, getting involved, each individual, as opposed to waiting for somebody else to offer solutions.
Yeah, I think there's been because of like the conditions, right? People become stagnant in society, especially when they feel like nothing good is happening and nothing's going to come their way. That's good for them, right? So they get, sometimes folks get complacent. But yeah, civic engagement is a necessity, and also, like we said, providing solutions, a solution to the drug epidemic. It's something that's like it's gonna constantly change as science changes, right? So as it stands right now, the science says that if we provide people with a place to use their drugs, there's less of a chance that they're going to die, number one, because they'll be taken care of by our medical staff, and number two, it gives those folks the opportunity to seek treatment. It also, more than anything, it gets folks off the street using drugs in the open air, right? Because that's like the biggest complaint. People are using drugs outside. What do? Well, we can't put people in jail. We could put people in jail for using drugs like they did in the 80s and 90s, but the only people going to jail is black and brown people, in this community. So again, it's going to destroy the family structure. There's a lot of things that come with that. So if we were empathetic towards the people who are using for whatever reason that they're using, if we were a little more empathetic and try to understand the root cause of all this stuff and get them into treatment, meet them where they are. Like, I know you're hurt. Whenever you want to get some food, there's somewhere for you to go eat. There's somewhere for you to take a shower. There's also people there to take care of you just in case you overdose. Things have changed. In New York, they just opened up 2 safe consumption sites, and it's worked miracles. There have been no overdoses since they've opened up. No people died from overdoses. We had 2 people die here in Kensington yesterday from overdose. This is a real thing. There's more people dying from overdoses in our streets every year than there are people dying from gun violence.
Yeah, this reminds me that I have a good friend, David Slinger from Gaudenzia, who actually is a former addict. He was addicted to alcohol and drugs, and I think he's fully recovered, but he says it's still a struggle every day, with alcohol especially. The solution, I think, what he would say, I think, is what you just alluded to, offering hope, offering people, instead of punishing them. I mean, the people who end up in prison for drugs, that's not a solution. In fact, in many cases, that leads to even more of an addiction, more serious addiction, and connections to crime and all that. So, prison is not a solution. Is helping them. Mayor Rendell was in favor of these places where you could control them and provide needles that were safe. So is that one solution?
Yeah, and the needle exchange program was started because of the blow up of AIDS and HIV in the city, particularly in the Latino community, because there was a lot of Latinos in the 80s and 90s who were using intravenously and sharing needles and then going home to an unsuspected wife and giving them HIV. So the idea was, if we give them clean needles, then they're not going to spread HIV, they're not going to spread hepatitis, which is still the case today, right? And that also brings people to a place where they can get services where they otherwise won't be getting them. If you go to places like Prevention Point, or they have Savage Sisters, Red Umbrella out there in Kensington, these folks are out there feeding people, making sure they see doctors, because they have doctors that give wound care. And they're not only open to like drug users. If you're too poor to get some food, they'll get you some food, they'll get you whatever you need. But the idea is to ensure that the communicable diseases are under control, number one, because again, people are gonna use. That's just the fact of life, they're gonna use. So let's make it as safe as possible for them. Like, we know that everybody drives, well, mostly everybody drives, right? Everybody has a seatbelt. Not everybody wears a seatbelt, but for safety, you wear a seatbelt when you get in your car. That is harm reduction in its most basic form.
Exactly.
So if we know people are gonna put themselves in harm's way for whatever reason, we should be able to also give them some guardrails just to make it safe for them. We do it with food. We regulate food. We regulate everything we do. It's safety. It's just to make sure people are safe. We're not condoning that people are using. We're not. But at the end of the day, they're hurting themselves and nobody else.
Yeah. Also, it's not just poor people.
Yeah.
Addiction it hits everybody.
Across the board.
Yes.
Across the board. But poor people are the ones that get stigmatized.
Right.
Exactly.
So. And they're the ones who lack the resources to fight.
Yes.
There was a person who, actually, he had a program here in our station, Brett Carpenter.
I know Brett.
Who has been helping people with addiction for a while. And that reminds me that this part of Kensington, where there are so many of them, that these people need clothing. And this time of the year, when the weather gets really bad, I mean, that's when you need to bring them coats, bring them any kind of clothing, any kind of aid you can provide. Yeah. And if you don't want to do it in person, give to some of these organizations that are already in the community.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, I'll take that even a step further. The city could provide them shelter. Ultimately, the city could provide them shelter.
But so many of them refuse to go to those shelters?
It's because of the barriers they get put. Like, so if they go to a shelter, they're not allowed to have a cigarette. They're not allowed to have.
They have a schedule.
They have to be there at a certain time. And, you know, you're talking about people, some folks that are dealing with mental health issues, right? Or are dealing with some type of trauma that they've had in their life. So kind of people putting these stringent rules on them turns them off to it. You know, I believe that we can help people without mistreating them. You know, we can help them, like meet them where they are. You got to go smoke a cigarette, go smoke a cigarette. But showing them, like you said earlier, showing them hope, showing them love, right? That changes people, because once a person knows that you're really there for them, their whole attitude is going to change. They're going to be more open to talking to you, letting you know what's going on in their lives. Like, there's a lot of things going on in Kensington that people aren't seeing. There's research happening on how to help women who are addicted to drugs and doing sex work, how to protect them from, transmitting HIV or getting HIV themselves. There's this thing called PrEP that completely stops people from being infected by HIV if their partner is. So there's a lot of things happening, and a lot of people are working to ensure that this does not get out of control, and that people get resources. I think that there's been a misstep with city officials with providing resources for the community as a whole. And there's been a lot of divestment in Kensington, you know, throughout the years. So that divestment has hurt the people that are just living there, that aren't using drugs, that are just living there, right? So those people we have to take into account as well, because they need help, because there hasn't been anything or anyone to help them in the last 20 years.
Right. It seems, I mean, from some of the people that I talked to about the problems of that, the people who are addicted and concentrate in this part of the city, what I hear from many people is that the government seems to just have neglected that area. Mm-hmm. So like, okay, we're not going to deal with that because we don't have a solution. Yeah. We don't know what to do about it, and they don't want shelters. They resist government assistance in that way. The private organizations are the ones who are day-to-day involved in helping them, but ultimately, that's not the solution. You say the government needs to do something, get involved.
Yeah.
But where do we start? There we are again.
Yeah,
where do we start?
So one is, I believe we start by getting resources to the community at large, right? That's for infrastructure, getting grants for storefronts, for getting grants for houses on the blocks, ensuring that people who live in the neighborhood can buy houses again, right? Getting the economy in the neighborhood to a place where people are making $30,000 a year, and that's not very high, but it's a start. That would take getting jobs into the neighborhood and prioritizing the community with those jobs. And you know, a lot of people are going to say, well, people who just don't want to work, they're going to take any job. People shouldn't have to take any job. They should be able to choose a job that pays them well, that gives them benefits, and ensures that, you know, they can live their lives. I can remember in Kensington, walking through Kensington as a kid, and the businesses were bustling. You know, most people own their houses.
Yeah, that area has not always been
No, it hasn't.
Estamos en compañía de Moses Santana, hablando sobre varios temas aquí en la Mesa Redonda. Estamos en Usalamedia. No se vayan, regresamos en un momento. Pagano's Market and Bar has been serving gourmet Italian foods in Center City for 3 generations. Call Matthew Pagano for all your catering needs, and during these difficult times, please mention Fernando Mendez and receive a nice discount along with free delivery. Paganos also makes the finest gift boxes in the city for your holiday needs. Visit paganosmarketandbar.com. So, Mo Santana, we hope you come back some other time and we have a chance to discuss other issues. Thank you for coming today. Señores oyentes, hemos llegado al final de este programa en Usalamedia, la mesa redonda de Roundtable. Les habló Fernando Mendez en compañía de Santana. Dani Ramos dirigió este programa. Hasta la próxima. Greetings from the city of brotherly love. I am Fernando Mendez, host of the Roundtable. We invite you to listen to our discussion of the themes of the day when we bring you regional, national, and international news.